grandparents and insulin. My adrenaline kicked in. I felt like I was flying and the fastest guy in the world. I came back to my apartment and opened the door. The unit had an unusual smell that I couldn't explain. Perhaps it was because the unit had been shut up for 30 hours and there had been no humans inside. Then I realized that I didn't have any money, not $1 in my pocket. I just had a soap and some shower gel, and I needed to wash my uniform. I was looking at my machine gun that I felt in the kitchen. And then, feeling of being alone, very alone. I felt that ache in my chest again. I was in love with a woman that I was never going to see again. I was very young and all my dreams were disappearing. I had mixed emotions, feeling helpless, useless, little. I wanted something I couldn't have, love. I always dreamed about love, but instead I got a love that had been taken away from me. Then I had to go to war. I started to hate everything about myself. I cleaned myself up and looked around, thinking to myself that I need to see my grandfather. He lived with his wife Rose across the street. I passed many cars that had been destroyed, including my grandfather. It looked like Swiss cheese, shrapnel holes everywhere but the interior. Fortunately, the engine had not been touched. I walked up 2 levels and knocked, but nobody answered. I went downstairs to the basement where people had been staying in cramped conditions for several nights. There, I found my grandfather and grandmother. Well, I call her grandmother. Rose was a very kind woman. I tried to describe my first day in the war. My grandfather was not happy or proud. He was a young communist, a proletariat. I mean, he was the guy who was supposed to be the priest, but partisans came into the monastery and recruited him from an early age to be partisan fighter. While I was walking to Rose and my grandfather, I saw his eyes were full of tears, but he didn't cry. He was just smoking. And I said to him, "What is it?" Rose told me, "We don't have insulin anymore. We can't go to the doctor and we can't go to the chemist." I told them I would sort it out, and then that the field hospital would have some. The hospital was only a few kilometers away, so around there I asked the doctor, and he gave me enough for 30 days, but said this was the very last supply they had. So I was rushing back, and then the shelling started. I was running, ducking, and lying on the ground. Running, ducking, lying. I felt that one of the next shells was going to hit in front, behind, or on top of me. My adrenaline kicked in. I felt it like I was flying and the fastest guy in the world. Clearly, I was not. I was chubby even then. I got back to the basement in 40 minutes. I gave my grandfather the insulin. He couldn't believe it. And then he said, "All my kids, including your mother, abandoned me. My grandchildren abandoned me. But one grandchild here is to help." I told him life was unpredictable. He was my teacher and my mentor. My grandfather was crying because his children had left him without telling him. And I was the one who was caring for him. It was not easy for me to care for him. Everyone knew he was a high-ranking police officer in communist system. The majority of people did support him, as they knew he was a good man who had done a lot of good things. Of course, some people in positions of power didn't like that my grandfather was around. My grandfather gave me some money and told me to go and buy something to eat. I left and set out into the night. All the lights were switched off, and there was no cars and no sound. There was a creepy silence surrounding everything. I knew most of the people spent the night in the makeshift shelters in the basements. So I went back upstairs to my apartment and fell asleep, believing I was a hero. Really, I was nothing, just a lonely boy who was very lost. My 19th birthday was approaching, and I knew I wouldn't be celebrating with my parents. They didn't believe in my birthdays anyways or Christmases. I simply thought that one day everything is gonna work out well for me. You wake up in a city that has been under siege from the north, east and south for 2 months, and yet there are still people walking around and traveling on public transport trying to function. People were cleaning the rubble, glass, bricks and other debris from the street. I kept wondering how morale remained high and how people were defiant against all odds. No one knew when the next bombardment was going to start, and there was no signs of warnings that death could be around the corner. There was nobody knocking on the door to tell you the shelling was about to start, to go and hide. People were still walking around trying to buy things and pay bills. September 91 was approaching. The following month, I was going to experience some of the hardest battles back to back that will last until the end of November. In the meantime, I went for some crash courses on being a sniper, commando, how to handle landmines and anti-tank weapons. They were all short courses. There was no time to train properly. Imagine being a teenager and learning all these skills that they were designed for one purpose: to kill others. My city was being starved to death. There was only one road in and out, and railroad trucks were sporadic and always targeted. The Federal Army would receiving reports from the Air Force, who circled above us like vultures. We did offer some resistance with our courage and morale, boosted by desire to be free. We even shot at the planes with everything from pistols to anti-aircraft cannons. I was still in the same summer uniform. September is officially the start of autumn, and with comes the rain, fog and frost, exactly in that order. That autumn was going to bring more destruction and death than I ever thought possible, with more misery and sadness and violence escalating on unimaginable scale. Me, I already had a 2 months combat experience behind me. I shared this with all different kinds of people from every part of Croatia. Everyone had bled with their focus on independence and democracy, and were determined that we must win every battle. Every country prepared itself for war. Croatia didn't have that luxury. It was a young country who stood up and started defending the country from an aggressor with the third most powerful army in Europe. This army had invested almost 45 years in training, equipment, weaponry, tactics, and had allies everywhere around the world. Then there was us, young, green, with little training. The life of the soldier is very lonely. There is no big mystery to it. You share in the good and the bad with your fellow soldiers, officers and commanders. Even share the bullets. But when the moment comes, I experienced that every soldier is lonely once they disconnect from their everyday lives. There was a heavy atmosphere hanging over every soldier's head. It stemmed from anxiety, memories of the past with family, friends, husbands, wives and children. Each one of us was fighting the war, not against the enemy in front of you with the tanks and planes, but a war against yourself. In life, you don't know what your limits are. No one does. Experts will talk about the fact that you need to think positively. I believe that's partially correct. But when you are on your own, it's all about your thoughts and imagination. Something every soldier lives with it when he goes into combat is He has memories of the past. The present only has a danger requiring skills to survive the next attack and the next shelling. In my case, my head was full of my ex-girlfriend and my parents. You don't know what's going to happen next. In those brief moments when you can relax, you find yourself fighting a war against yourself in your head. Nobody can help you. Nobody. I saw many of my comrades start to drink and do other stuff. I had no idea where it comes from, to help them numb their minds. You didn't want to think about next day with buildings crumbling brick by brick in front of your eyes. Even thinking about what life would be like if you are in another country far, far away. It all added to the misery and pain. I came to realize that regardless of how difficult things got, humans are amazing and improvising. They're amazing. Humans are amazing when it comes to improvising. This is especially true in war when we need to fix our equipment, lack ammunition, and struggle to find food and water. It can be similar in business. When it feels like you're trapped in a corner, you have no choice but to improvise. Your survival can be down to your next move, when you have taken small steps forward and then are forced to retreat. It is harder to go forward the next time. When you first lose ground, it's always much harder to regain the same ground. We become known as the Fire Brigade. Fire Brigade unit, and we were awarded a special yellow skull and lightning bolt insignia. The Fire Brigade unit was an official term. We were a specialist unit of the Ministry of Interior, sent to extinguish the fire here and there. We were basically pieces of meat who display courage and discipline, terrorize the enemy, die with dignity and glorify the political party. We were being sent from one combat to another, filling any gaps. My entire unit was truly fearless. This came from most of them not having children or families. You were dedicated to the cause, but the war in your head was relentless. No one can prepare you for how this feels, so you have to hone your skills, improvise, and hope for the best. We spent a lot of time joking about people's lives and making fun of each other. Some people were a little angry, but we always gave each other hope. Whether I was in combat or at home relaxing, I needed hope to keep me going for another day. Sometimes your mind will play tricks on you. At night you can smell fear, anxiety, and pending violence. I can't explain it, but there is something about the way nature feels around a war zone. When I was on guard duty at night, sometimes I felt like the trees were moving towards you. With the absence of night vision equipment, grass can look like an enemy soldier. In those moments, I often start talking to myself in my head. I would look above me at the stars, remembering things from my past. I knew that if I kept looking at the tree in the field in front of me, standing between my village and where enemy was, I would go crazy. Sure enough, the next day, the tree was still there in the same exact place.